Welcome from a spine-tingling voyage through the world of trains, dear listeners. Numerous people have traveled great distances on these iron behemoths, but not all of their journeys have happy endings. Get ready for 3 horrifying true stories that will make you reconsider traveling by train ever again. As we explore the dark side of these tracks, turn down the lights and be ready for the unexpected. Story 1. The Phantom Train of Silver Creek. Marcus was a railroad employee who was given the task of checking the Silver Creek track one chilly autumn evening. The village was still, and the people had long talked of a ghost train haunting these tracks, but Marcus waved these tales away as folklore. He started his examination with a lantern in hand, not realizing that this night would forever alter his course in life. The temperature dropped as Marcus continued to walk along the track, and a strange quietness around him. He heard the distinct sound of a train approaching abruptly. Marcus peered down the track, confused, but that night there were no trains scheduled. The sensations beneath his feet intensified as the noise level increased. He began to panic as he noticed an ancient, run-down steam engine speeding at him with empty, dark windows. Trapped in terror, Marcus could only stare as the spectral train streaked toward him, its weathered old body shining in the twilight. The engine produced an overwhelming noise, vibrating so loudly that it rocked the floor beneath him. Marcus saw something unsettling as it drew nearer. Its windows were completely dark and lifeless. There was no one at the wheel, but the train moved as though it had a purpose. The train rushed past him and disappeared into the night, leaving only the echo of its eerie whistle, just as abruptly as it had appeared. Marcus was startled and hurried to report the incident, but his bosses weren't buying it. He had no proof to back up his story, and there was no record of any train operating on the rails that evening. Marcus was aware of what he saw, though, since the vision was too genuine and vivid. But the locals were not as taken aback. They talked about the Silver Creek ghost train, the agitated remnants of a locomotive that had crashed decades earlier, killing every passenger. The narrative endured, a terrible recollection that would not go away, frightening tale permanently entwining Marcus with the rails where the unfortunate train met its demise. Story 2. The Vanishing Passenger. A young lady named Eleanor boarded the midnight train that would return her home on a rainy night in 1952. She was the only traveler in her compartment, so she took a seat and watched the rain slide down the window as the train chugged into the pitch-black night. But as the evening drew on, Eleanor became aware of an oddity. Sitting across from her with his head to toe soaked, a man was staring. It unnerved her to see him so suddenly because she hadn't seen him get on the train. Even though Eleanor made an effort to ignore him, his presence grew more uncomfortable. His eyes were hollow and he continued to stare without blinking or moving. Eleanor made the decision to exit the compartment as fear took hold of her. The man eventually said in a low, raspy voice, "You shouldn't have boarded this train," as she got up and turned to depart. Eleanor was so terrified that she jumped out of her seat and ran to the next compartment, her heart racing. Her breath stopped in her throat as she realized the enigmatic man had disappeared as she peered over her shoulder. She anxiously scoured the train, trembling with fear and panic, expecting to see the man again, but he was nowhere to be found. In a moment of desperation, she approached the conductor, her voice wavering as she described the unsettling event. The train's whole interior was searched thoroughly by the worried but dubious conductor. However, in spite of their attempts, the peculiar traveler was nowhere to be found. Eleanor carried the experience with her till she eventually arrived at her destination. The station master listened closely as she told him the terrifying tale. His face darkened as he related a terrifying story. Decades before, at the precise location where Eleanor had boarded, a guy who fit the description had been hit by the train. The people in the area thought that his restless ghost appeared to warn travelers of the horrors that waited in the dark on the midnight train. Eleanor was deeply uneasy after the frightening meeting, which served as a warning that some ghosts are stuck in the past. Story 3. The Curse of the Abandoned Railcar. An ancient, deserted railcar that was left to rust following a fatal accident many years ago is located in the middle of a thick forest. The vehicle was a part of an opulent train, but the people within never made it to their intended location. All those on board perished when the train derailed, and the railcar was abandoned as a somber memorial of the catastrophe. A group of adolescents decided to investigate the car one summer night because they were looking for a thrill, despite the locals' warnings not to approach it and its supposed curse. They felt apprehensive as they got closer to the railcar, but they persisted, chuckling uncomfortably. Inside, there was a lingering faint smell of fire and a dense air of rotting. The youths chatted and looked around, but when they heard faint voices, cries of pain and requests for assistance, their laughter soon faded. Abruptly, the temperature plummeted, and the shadows in the automobile appeared to move by themselves. When the group realized they were confined, panic broke out. The door of the abandoned train slammed shut with such force that the entire building shook, turning the once light-hearted ambiance deadly serious. They were shouting for aid and beating on the walls out of desperation, but the quiet, thick forest around them was drowning out their pleas. The minutes stretched into excruciating hours, and time appeared to elongate. A pervasive feeling of dread descended upon them as the train seemed to be alive and feeding off their terror as the air grew colder. The inside of the railcar was a disconcerting sight when assistance eventually arrived. The youngsters were discovered clustered in a corner, their bodies quivering wildly and their faces ghostly pale. Their eyes had a hollow, haunting expression in them that had previously been brimming with young curiosity. The horrors they had seen in that damned automobile had taken their voices, leaving them mute. The railcar was quickly closed, judged to be too dangerous to be left open. However, the story of the cursed ghosts aboard the railcar only got stronger, acting as a terrifying warning to anyone who would be tempted to disturb the final resting place of those unfortunate people, staying as a somber memorial to a long-gone but never-forgotten catastrophe, the railcar. These tales serve as a reminder that not all train travel ends in a safe place. The tracks can occasionally lead us into the unknown, where the distinction between the living and the dead becomes hazy. Remember these stories while you get ready for your next train journey, and bear in mind that some tracks are best left untouched. Dear listeners, be alert. You never know what's around the corner that could surprise you.